Nike seem to be allergic to innovation. They seem to be allergic to creating anything new. They seem to be allergic to pushing new silhouettes and really challenging their consumers. So instead, we just get inundated with retros, which is boring. Don't get me wrong. But I guess if you're going to do the retro thing, at least try and, mix it up a bit. So Nike have this new Air Force One that just released the other day, actually. If I'm not mistaken, the name of the Air Force One is called the Nike Air Force One Low Dirty Triple White. And according to Complex Sneakers that's made the video, Nike is crazy for this one. The latest release of the dot swoosh division is the Air Force One Triple White, a shoe that looks like it's been stomped out and worn for months. The sneaker looks filthy brand new out of the box. Nike says the shoe's dirty look is part of the scratch away exterior that gets cleaner and crisper the more time you put into it. So we tried to clean them up. The Air Force One Dirty Triple releases the 7th of May, £130 and sneakers exclusive. So as I said, if you can't see the picture, it's basically a pre-distressed, pre-aged Nike Air Force One. The midsole is all yellowed out. The top is also covered in dirt. If anything, it kind of reminds you of like white people, essentially. When they wear Air Force Ones, especially white ones, they don't seem to care about them being crispy and white like maybe us minorities do. That's part of the culture, especially in sneakers. You kind of want to keep your Air Force Ones without wrinkles, creases on the front of the toe box. You want them to be shiny and box fresh. And if they get smashed up or banged up, the most you could do with the Air Force One is maybe put them in a washing machine, but that takes away some of the structural integrity. Or sometime back in there, what we used to do is that we used to take white shoe polish and get them looking really bright. But unfortunately, Air Force Ones out of the box, probably if you're going to use them every day, might last you a couple of months, right? In terms of looking still spanking new. And they look better, in my opinion, brand new. But people still like wearing them beat up because they're very comfortable. And I have noticed recently, when I've been browsing on places like Vinted to buy like secondhand shoes, I have noticed an influx or an increase in people selling really crazy beat up Air Force Ones. Now I'm not too sure if these people are selling these Air Force Ones beat up, just hoping somebody buys them, or if there's actually a secondary market for people to buy beat up Air Force Ones for festivals and stuff. Because whenever you go to a festival, one of the number one shoes you see people wearing are Air Force Ones, especially white ones, because they're they can go most things. They get beat up. You can just leave them under you can just kind of spray them in water or a wet kind of piece of cloth and kind of get most of the grime away and kind of rinse and repeat. So a lot of people do tend to wear them. So I wonder if a lot of people who are buying these really, because if you honestly, I dare you, if you use Vinted, please check out Vinted and go and search for Air Force Ones and search via pricing as cheap as possible, and you'll see some Air Force Ones that have been brutalized, like with holes in the back of the heels, like the back of the heel is like all lopsided because the person's been walking weird and shit, covered in absolute dirt. The kind of things where I don't think you could even kind of resuscitate them or bring them back to life, revive them in any way, shape or form. So it's a very niche interest. I think most people like their Air Force Ones crispy, bright, fresh. So it's interesting that Nike are kind of appealing to a very small niche base of customers who like to bang up their Air Force Ones, because I think most of us don't like our Air Force Ones looking beat up. We want Air Force Ones to look brand new and shiny, but for some reason Nike did these. So let's play the clip of what they look like when you try and clean them up.
We know you're going to be mad at this one. Nike's Dot Swoosh division is fully embracing the dirty white Air Force One meme. Dot Swoosh does drops related to gaming and internet culture, hence them referencing all those infamous images you see of cooked Air Force Ones online. There's a little toothbrush attached to these. They literally made a pair that comes fried out of the box. The catch is you have to clean them. The idea is that if you wear the shoe, the faux aging fades away into an actual clean sneaker. We don't have the time for all that, so we just grabbed the magic eraser and got to scrubbing in order to make the shoes clean. For what it's worth, Nike tells us that you really have to wear the shoe in order to get the dirty exterior to fade off. Like, you can scratch it, but apparently it's easier to wear away manually. We even tried to hit it with some Windex to see if that did the trick any better. Despite us working very hard on scrubbing the shoe, we gotta say we couldn't get the Air Force Ones.
By the way, I don't think that's true. I think that's waffle. They're saying that the shoe looks better when you wear them away, but you can't scrub away the dirt. That makes no sense. How's the dirt gonna peel away from the shoe in a more natural, better way, quote unquote, if you wear it vis-a-vis if you take a wet cloth and try and wipe away the dirt? I just think it's just the idea behind it is interesting. I don't mind it, but it's a bit dumb personally. Like, you're not gonna. I remember when the Tom Sachs Mars Yard came out, maybe the first ones. The idea behind that, having that outsole, was that outsole would pick up dirt very quickly, and the idea behind it was that to make sure people wore them and broke them in over time, so that they didn't stay crispy, fresh white, like Tom Sachs was against that. He wants people to use the shoes. So the idea behind that was that those type of soles, even if you wore it once, would immediately catch dirt and shit, and there's no way to kind of take that away. Kind of, kind of yellow and stain and whatever else it may be. So that makes more sense. But and then sometimes if you do the fucking yellow staining on the midsole, it kind of harkens back to the days of old vintage shoes where they'd be found in warehouses and shit. And if they're stuck in storage somewhere over time, the polyurethane kind of midsole would yellow, innit? And you get this nice little stain effect and kind of give you this nostalgic feeling of like buying vintage shoes. But to cover the whole thing in dirt and then say the dirt only comes off when you wear them doesn't make sense to me personally. It doesn't make sense. I think if it doesn't come off if you wipe them, I think the idea behind it is that the stain is part of the feature. So imagine if you do wear them, maybe the creases and shit and the stains will actually complement each other in a way.
Significantly cleaner. Maybe we really got to beat them up, wear them to Coachella or something to get the clean layer underneath. Not gonna lie, after doing all this, it kind of feels like we got tricked. Exactly. Like Nike trolled us into cleaning their sneakers. And to be honest, that totally makes sense for a meme sneaker like this smoked out Air Force One. Like, this is the final product and you can barely tell the difference between the shoe we cleaned and the shoe we didn't. The Dirty Triple White releases exclusively on May 7 via sneakers in the US for $130.
I don't mind them as an idea, like as a concept and stuff, but I think it does go to show just how lacking in innovation and in fresh new ideas Nike are, because it's like maybe this would have made more sense if they decided to go and get the old last of the Air Force Ones when they originally came out in the 80s and actually make them to spec again. That would be pretty cool if they decided, because if you're going to do the whole retro thing, you got to give people something interesting to buy. And maybe they decided to go back to the drawing board and actually retro an Air Force One. Because I think they did it back in the day with the Air Force One. I think I had one before. It's like an Air Force One high that was like white with a grey swoosh. I think that was one of the first iterations of the Air Force One high that they re-retroed, but the shape and silhouette wasn't good. But if they did decide to go back to the drawing board and kind of make a reimagined Air Force One with the exact specification how they come out in the 80s with a very, with a thinner sort of toe box shape, a little bit more of a sleeker, boxier design, that would be pretty cool. But this kind of fake dirty thing is a bit weird. The only other thing that makes sense for me, where maybe the inspiration came from, maybe this is slightly based on the Margiela sort of like covering their shoes in paint style thing, where over time when you wear them, the paint cracks and creases and crinkles, where your foot flexes, so everybody kind of gets like a different sort of wear and tear on their shoe over time, and obviously the leather underneath also kind of wears. So I wonder if that's kind of part, because I can see here there are some cracks and some creases here and there that appear, but I don't really, the shape of them is pretty decent. I do like the fact that you've got this white, because I don't think I've seen an all white Air Force One with a tiny swoosh at the front of the mudguard thing. That's pretty cool. Usually you see that, on collaborations. I think Kith did the collaboration with Air Force One that had this before, and a few other people, but this is a kind of cool little code.jp limited edition sort of thing there in the front. I also like the fact that the eyelets look like they've been kind of stamped wrong. Like the eyelets, look like they've been stamped twice. The holes there to kind of give this weird sort of like, exaggerated effect. But I'm sure that's it's probably to mimic when you wear your Air Force Ones a lot and you tie your laces really tightly. It can kind of, make the eyelet hole kind of open up a little bit more. So I'm assuming that's what that's tied into. But I don't mind it. I just wish there'd be a lot more innovative and do some more interesting shapes, maybe some more original shapes instead of all these retros, because it's kind of getting a bit tired. I'm not gonna lie, but it's an interesting gimmick at least. It kind of reminds me of something that Mishkif would do. It seems very Mishkif coded, that brand that does those safety boots and shit and other things and crazy Timberlands. It seems like something like that. But maybe as a one-off project, just to kind of put out there, it makes sense. But I'm sure there's a ton of designers working at Nike now that are trying to get original silhouettes, original shapes, fresh new models off the ground, and they're not getting any encouragement, they're not getting any approval. But then Nike are quick to, bring out a pair of stained Air Force Ones that are meant to get cleaner the more you wear them. It's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? But anyway, they're available now. Air Force One triple white, available now to purchase if you're that way inclined.